Good afternoon, all. Kai, good morning. For the rest of us, we are ready to go here. So I call to order this hearing of the Readiness Subcommittee. And if you are not speaking, please turn off your microphones. First, some of the administrative and technical notes that we're required to do. Members are reminded that they must be visible on screen within the software platform for the purposes of identification. Members must continue to use the software platform's video function while attending the hearing, unless they experience connectivity issues or other technical problems that render the member unable to fully participate on camera. If you experience technical difficulties, please contact the committee staff. When you're recognized, the video will be broadcast via television and internet feeds. You'll be recognized as normal for questions. There is a gavel sheet, and we'll discuss that in a few moments. But if you want to speak at any other time, you must seek recognition verbally. And of course, mute your microphone when you're not speaking, and remember to unmute prior to speaking. Please be aware that there is a slight lag between when you are speaking and the video comes on. So hold your voice for just a second. Please remember to keep the software platform's video function on for the entirety of the time that you're attending the hearing. If you leave for a short period for reasons other than joining a different proceeding, leave your video function on. If you are leaving to join a different proceeding, or you just plain had enough of us and will be absent for a significant period of time, you should exit the platform entirely and then rejoin when you return. Be advised that I've designated a committee staff member to mute unrecognized members' microphones if necessary. So we have the control. Please use the platform's chat feature to communicate with staff regarding technical or logistics support issues. Finally, there is a 5-minute countdown clock on the software platform. Keep your eyes on it. If necessary, I will remind you when your time is up. So, are we all clear on the details? Very good. Now, I'd like to make a few opening remarks. Today's witnesses are the global integrators for their services installation enterprises. They oversee the strategic and long-term planning for our installations, ensure the sustainment of existing infrastructure, and advocate for how future investments should be prioritized. They implement and operationalize the changes to law that we have passed in the NDAAs. Our committee in the last 4 NDAAs has explicitly instructed the Department of Defense, and therefore each of the presenters today, to address energy conservation and base energy resiliency. In the 2 most recent NDAAs, we've instructed the DoD to plan and prepare for extreme weather events and sea level rise caused by climate change. Generals, you are responsible for making our installations resilient to the hazards they face. These hazards include disruptions to utilities from natural and man-made sources, water scarcity, strong hurricanes on our coasts, tornadoes, droughts in the west, earthquakes, and flooding along our coast. Actually, I wrote that, but droughts also occur in the east. For example, Georgia, Alabama, and even South Carolina. 2 years ago, Camp Lejeune and Tyndall Air Force Base were devastated by Hurricanes Florence and Michael. When I asked the service leaders how we could avoid the $5 billion damage in the infrastructure to just those 2 bases, I was told repeatedly that the answer is very simple. The buildings that were well maintained and had been renovated to today's building standards were more resilient and in many cases not damaged by the storms. Those that were not updated, they were damaged. And so the services knew the solutions. But for years, the services have taken considerable risk in the installation portfolio. deferring necessary maintenance and upgrades on existing buildings in order to fund new platforms and systems. Well, the bill has finally come due, not only in North Carolina and Florida with those two bases, but in California, where China Lake sustained $1.1 billion in earthquake damage, much of which is again attributed to deferred maintenance and sustainment. Most recently, Texas and Oklahoma during Winter Storm Uri, where under-maintained roofs, facilities, pipes, HVAC systems contributed to preventable damage to the military infrastructure. The phenomena of deferred maintenance is not new, nor is it specific to any particular administration. It is a chronic issue. We see it across the entire Readiness Subcommittee's jurisdiction. The services consistently fail to fund and sustainment in favor. I'm going to read that again. The services consistently fail to fund sustainment in favor of new platforms and their support infrastructure. It's high time that we start learning and applying the lessons from these events, which we must now consider as normal. Given the range of threats to our installation, the best way to make sound, cost-effective decision is master planning. By getting a holistic view of both the threats to resiliency and the current condition of the installations, the services can make informed decisions that guide their investment priorities. And then with that information, we can do our job in providing the necessary authority and money. I look forward to this hearing and how the services are implementing the fiscal year 20 NDAA requirement to conduct resiliency informed master planning, especially at installations identified as being most at risk. Finally, our installations are not islands unto themselves. If Winter Storm Uri taught us anything, it's that resiliency challenges faced by the surrounding communities will impact the installations and the ability of the base's tenants to accomplish critical missions. The services must think of resiliency as a problem that extends beyond the fence line as they consider investments to improve energy, water, and extreme weather resiliency at our installations. With that in mind, Mr. Wilson, you're covering for our ranking member, Congressman Doug Lamborn today. You know this game. You were the chairman of this. Delighted you're with us. The platform is yours. Mr. Wilson.
And thank you, Chairman John Garamendi. Thank you very much. Today, we will hear testimony from the Air Force, Army, Navy, and Marine Corps installation commands about lessons learned from the Winter Storm Uri and various other recent extreme weather events, as well as the implementation of resiliency measures from the past 4 National Defense Authorization Acts. Domestic military installations are critical to our military readiness. They house the training, mission execution, and sustainment operations and serve as a home to our servicemen and women and their families. Over the past several years, extreme weather events such as severe flooding in the Midwest, hurricanes in the Gulf and East Coast, and crippling winter storms have exposed vulnerabilities at our installations. I gratefully represent the U.S. Army's Fort Jackson, which is currently refortifying its infrastructure after the 1,000-year flood of 2015, which caused Sims Lake Dam to fail. Existing vulnerabilities include outdated and unprepared infrastructure, concerns about energy resilience and dependence on commercial grids, and access to clean water. Each has the potential to undermine everyday activities at our installations and ultimately the critical work of our armed services. In February, Winter Storm Uri wreaked havoc across the United States, highlighting weather-related threats to our bases and yielding important lessons. Thankfully, installations such as Offutt Air Force Base, headquarters of the U.S. Strategic Command, demonstrated their resilience during the storm by disconnecting the base from the commercial power grid and operating off the 2 power plants on site with no disruption to operations. Other installations did not fare so well, experiencing prolonged power and water loss. Over the years, Congress and DoD have looked to prioritize the investments in resilience projects and better manage risk posed by extreme weather. I look forward to hearing today how the services are implementing provisions to strengthen our installations. Better planning is a key to the process. So-called black start tests have been re-employed to test the reliability of existing backup power and identify areas that require additional resiliency measures. Black starts have underscored the importance of microgridding or islanding, which generally means that an installation can maintain power when one or more of the connected power sources experience an outage or a not currently generating power. This, along with the other energy resilient mechanisms, is worth further exploring. The military services have accepted risk in their installation portfolios for years. The cost of that risk is now apparent. The estimated recovery costs for the hurricanes Michael and Florence and the military construction accounts alone were over $4 billion. These services can do better to assess risk and vulnerabilities at their installations to sustain installation operation and save taxpayer dollars in the wake of the events. Sensible, cost-effective investments will be the key to mitigating future risk. Better facility, energy, and water resilience is directly tied to the safety and security of our installations. We can do better as a nation to understand, plan for, and mitigate the posed threats as we've seen with the incredible winter storms. I want to thank the witnesses for their engagement today in this important topic, and I look forward to hearing about how your service is taking action. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Before I introduce the witnesses today, it occurred to me that Pogo may have had it correct. We've seen the enemy, and it is us. It is, in fact, the Armed Services Committee and the Appropriations Committee that have shortchanged the funding necessary to build the resiliency into our bases. It's my intent that that this committee will do everything it can to change that pattern of rather sad history. So with that, good news, maybe, if we can pull it off. I'm going to introduce our witnesses one at a time. I'm going to start with the U.S. Army, Lieutenant General Douglas Gabrin, Commanding General, Army Installation Management Command, and the rest of his title and where he is just above his head there. U.S. Army Military Command, Installation Management Command, Headquarters, Fort Sam Houston, Texas. General, why don't you get us started?
Well, Chairman Garamendi, good afternoon. Congressman Wilson and distinguished members of the subcommittee on readiness. Thank you for this opportunity to testify about Army installation resilience. I've been fortunate and honored to serve almost 37 years. My wife of 34 years is a former Army nurse and now on the front lines of COVID here in San Antonio. Our son's an officer candidate school at Fort Benning, Georgia. 18 PCS moved multiple deployments. We've lived and raised our children on military installations. So why do I tell you this? Because our service is a family affair, like many of yours. Installation readiness and resilience is very personal to me. So I look forward to updating you on the Army's efforts to mitigate and repair facilities impacted by Winter Storm Uri, as well as the strides we're taking to improve resiliency across our installations for the short and long term. So on behalf of Acting Secretary Whitley and the Chief of Staff of the Army, General McConville, I can assure you the Army takes very seriously the threats that climate change poses to our installations and facilities. Just last month in February, we experienced unprecedented conditions that shattered historical low temperature records for consecutive days. Winter Storm Uri hit us hard. In total, 694 facilities, including some barracks, 1,366 privatized homes across 4 installations, Fort Hood, Fort Sill, Fort Polk, and Fort Riley were damaged in some manner. Of the privatized homes impacted, 145 experienced enough damage for us to temporarily displace those residents with And with exceptional assistance from our privatized housing partners, we're on track to get all the remaining families back into their homes within 2 weeks. So our planning and preventive measures saved time and money, protected our force, and maintained mission readiness. Our contingency training along local first responders and service providers paid off for quick response times. We also validated that our aging facilities and systems failed first and suffered the most damage. Over time, our infrastructure has felt the effects of high use and limited funding. Army senior leaders recognize this, and we're taking decisive steps to improve our facilities, especially barracks. With continued support from Congress, the Army will continue to modernize our facilities to increase resilience as outlined in the new Army installation strategy. Now I'd like to highlight the Army Installation Energy and Water Strategic Plan. The Army will integrate energy and water considerations across the enterprise by focusing on 3 strategic goals: resilience, efficiency, and affordability. It's Army policy right now that our commanders will consider the impacts of changing climate and extreme weather into all infrastructure, plans, policies, and procedure. For example, the installation master planning will accomplish this by using the Army's climate assessment tool and the Army Climate Resilience Handbook to inform the planning process. Installations are also preparing energy and water plans to identify ways to improve efficiency and strengthen resiliency of our electrical and water systems. All Army installations are scheduled to complete these plans by the end of fiscal year 22. And to implement these plans, the Army will continue to aggressively pursue energy savings performance contracts. We have 99 of these already in place, and we're looking to expand. Together, these measures helped contribute to a 20% reduction in energy consumption over the last decade. We're also actively pursuing increased MILCON funding under DoD's Energy Resilience and Conservation Investment Program. In summary, through proactive planning, collaborative engagement among multiple stakeholders, and leadership by our garrison and senior commanders, we were able to act decisively to keep our soldiers and families safe during this winter storm. We're committed to improve the resilience of our installations, ensuring they are aligned with Army policy, the Army installation strategy, the Army Installation Energy and Water Strategic Plan to optimize our long-term investments. Chairman Garamendi, Congressman Wilson, thanks for the opportunity to testify before you today. I look forward to further dialogue in this important matter, and thanks for your continued support of the Army, soldiers, families, civilians, retirees, and veterans. I really look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Chairman, you're muted.
Commander of Navy Installations.
All right, Chairman Garamendi, I think that was my cue. So Chairman Garamendi, Congressman Wilson, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for this opportunity to testify today on the resilience of Navy installations. Our Navy 70 installations worldwide provide the platform from which the United States develops, generates projects, and sustains naval power. The capability and capacity of our installations to resist, adapt, and recover from crisis or disaster, whether natural or man-made, is fundamental to installation mission execution and support of the fleet, the fighter, and the family. We have what I believe is a strong record of considering, incorporating, and executing resiliency into all aspects of installation operations, to include infrastructure, facility, and utilities planning, design, construction, and repair, often in cooperation and coordination with state, county, and local communities, utility providers, etc. As a former installation commanding officer, a 3-time region commander, and today as commander of Navy Installations Command, resiliency has been and continues to be critical to mission execution and mission success. Also fundamental to execution and success are vibrant, productive, informal and formal relationships with state and local governments, other federal and public agencies, and private entities. These partnerships are absolutely critical to the continued success of our resilience initiatives. Many of our resiliency efforts and successes can be traced back to authorities and/or resourcing provided by Congress, which allow us to seek out and take advantage of resiliency building opportunities, both within Navy lifelines, but also in conjunction with other non-Navy organizations and entities. I look forward to continuing to work with Congress and this subcommittee to build upon our success and seek out clever and creative solutions to address Navy installation resiliency and the effects of our changing climate. Thank you for the opportunity to appear today, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Admiral, thank you very much. I now turn to the Marine Corps. General Banta, Marine Corps Installations Command. General.
Good afternoon, Chairman Garamendi, Congressman Wilson, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thanks for the invitation and opportunity to address the committee today on installation resiliency, which is critical to our ability to train forces and maintain readiness. I also wanted to thank Congress for your support to the Marine Corps' Hurricane Florence recovery efforts. Thanks to your strong support, we're making substantial progress in rebuilding Marine Corps Base Camp Lejeune and our air stations at Cherry Point and New River. As part of this effort, we're incorporating significant improvements to our facilities that will ultimately result in more resilient bases. We've also initiated resiliency initiatives across our installations, such as the ongoing master planning effort at MCRD Parris Island. That'll help mitigate the effects of myriad threats. To that point, when we think of resiliency, we consider our installation's ability to anticipate, prepare for, adapt to, and recover from a wide spectrum of threats to our operational readiness, to include the effects of climate change. So in that sense, installation resiliency is fundamental to enabling the operational readiness and warfighting capability of our Fleet Marine Forces and the Joint Force. And we know our installations are vulnerable targets for a growing host of sophisticated kinetic and non-kinetic threats, but also to environmental factors that threaten our ability to generate readiness and deploy and recover forces from our bases and stations. Recent events such as Winter Storm Uri, drastic changes to weather patterns, rising sea levels, natural disasters, COVID-19, insider threats, all of this underscores this point. Climate-related effects like wildfire and droughts routinely threaten our West Coast installations. Hurricanes and typhoons are a staple for our East Coast and Pacific bases, and the prospect of rising sea levels directly affects all of our coastal installations, with our recruit depot at Parris Island as a prime example. I'd like to take a moment to speak to the nexus between our efforts to develop our future force and opportunities to improve the resiliency of our installations. Our Commandant has initiated a comprehensive force design effort that will fundamentally reshape aspects of our future force, and we anticipate evolving our installations accordingly. As we work with our force planners who are actively experimenting with force design initiatives, we seek to refine and understand our future installation requirements and identify opportunities to improve our resiliency in the process. Examples include building upon investments in smart grids and microgrid technologies, incorporating the effects of climate change into all of our installation master plans, and designing and building our new infrastructure to maximize energy and water efficiency. As Hurricane Florence demonstrated at Camp Lejeune, our new assets and infrastructure built with updated construction standards were significantly more resilient to the storm's effects than our older facilities. We really appreciate the committee's support as we recover from the hurricane's damage, and that's resulted in rebuilding out of floodplains, applying updated standards for construction and repairs. While we're incorporating vulnerability assessments and evaluations into our master planning process, we recognize we still have work to do. We also recognize the interdependencies between our installations and the surrounding and supporting communities. In short, we must look beyond our fence line and plan with our local partners. For example, Marine Corps Air Station Cherry Point's Living Shoreline, a Readiness and Environmental Protection Integration Challenge submitted by the North Carolina Department of Agriculture is creating a living shoreline to mitigate erosion along the Neuse River. Additionally, MCICOM recently completed the Climate Change and Adaptation Resiliency Study to identify potential hazards and mitigation costs for MCRD Parris Island. Building upon this momentum, Parris Island and Beaufort recently partnered with the Low Country Council of Governments, the City of Beaufort, and the town of Port Royal to continue this resiliency planning work. We look forward to more opportunities to address similar issues in coordination with federal, state, and local partners. We're working to improve the resiliency of our installation's critical functions, such as the power grid, water distribution, and communications capabilities. Over the last few years, MCICOM has leveraged third-party financing, leasing mechanisms, energy resilience and conservation investment program, and FISRIM funding
to deliver clean energy while increasing the resilience of utilities infrastructure in support of critical missions. An example of this is Marine Corps Logistics Base Albany, which will become the first Marine Corps net zero installation this April, next month. This significant energy achievement will produce as much electricity from renewable green energy sources as it consumes from the surrounding community utility providers. So in closing, the Marine Corps continues to learn from past events and seeks new solutions to shore up our coastlines, modernize our bases infrastructure, and increase our ability to recover from extreme weather events. We have to be agile enough to adapt to the effects of drastic changes in the environment and reinforce the foundations of our installation's resiliency. Thank you once again for the opportunity to appear before you this afternoon and for your leadership in addressing today's climate-related changes. I look forward to your questions.
General, thank you very much. I now turn to General Allen, Commander of the Air Force Civil Engineering Center. General Allen.
Good afternoon, Chairman Garamendi, Congressman Wilson, and other distinguished members of the subcommittee. I'm honored to appear before you today to discuss Air Force and Space Force installation resilience. As you're well aware, natural disasters and severe weather have significantly impacted Air Force and Space Force installations over the last few years. We are aggressively moving forward with rebuild efforts at Tyndall Air Force Base and Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska, and are continuing to assess damage and recover from recent winter storms that impacted large portions of the United States. It's of utmost importance to us that we ensure our installations are ready and resilient. Our installations are the platforms from which we build, deploy, and employ readiness and combat power. All Air Force and Space Force missions start and end on an installation. Just as importantly, they are home to thousands of airmen, guardians, and their families. In recent years, Congress has included numerous provisions in legislation to enhance installation resilience, and the Department of the Air Force is working to implement them. We've developed a severe weather and climate screening risk assessment playbook, which we have used to conduct initial assessments of exposure and risk due to severe weather and climate hazards at all major installations. The results will be used to develop installation resilience component plans to be included in each installation development plan, as required by the fiscal year 20 NDAA. Additionally, we have completed installation energy plans for 24 installations and plan to have another 20 complete by the end of this fiscal year. We've also conducted energy resilience readiness exercises at Vandenberg Air Force Base in California, Hanscom Air Force Base in Massachusetts, and Joint Base McGuire-Dix Lakehurst in New Jersey. We have 2 more planned at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio and Eielson Air Force Base in Alaska for this year. And in future years, we expect to complete at least 5 per year as required by the fiscal year 2021 National Defense Authorization Act. Finally, I'd like to mention the recent winter storms and extreme cold that impacted a large portion of the United States. 28 Department of the Air Force installations were impacted to some extent. We're continuing to assess damage and are committed to restoring facilities to full mission capability. Majority of the damage was the result of burst water and fire suppression lines due to freezing. Our personnel prepared our installations admirably, but numerous factors, including sustained periods of extreme cold, degraded facilities and infrastructure condition, and off-base power and water supply issues led to damage and temporary interruptions. As we remain steadfast in our resolve to provide credible combat capability to the joint force and for our nation, the Department of the Air Force is committed to continuing to work with this subcommittee and the rest of Congress to ensure our installations are ready and resilient. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much, General Allen. For all of the witnesses, we thank you for your presentation. I'm going to read the gavel list here, and we will modify as people come and go. Garamendi, Wilson, Courtney, Scott, Crow. If other members want to participate, please raise your hand and the staff will get you in the gavel list. Please be aware that Kai wants to be on, that people exit and return to the hearing, and the gavel list is somewhat flexible, resulting in that. Mr. Johnson also would like to participate. Okay, so I get to start. Here's where I want to start with this. This is going to be a long-term process in which this subcommittee will carry on the work of the previous years and really try to enhance the opportunities for the military services to address the infrastructure needs on the various facilities. It's a process that's going to require interaction between the presenters today and the men and women that follow them in these positions. That interaction has to be more than the president's budget. It has to be an interaction that begins with the sharing of information early into the process. General Graben, you indicated that the Army will complete its work on the assessment of the infrastructure resiliency in the end of the 2022 fiscal year. The other witnesses indicated that they have work in process on this. I don't want to wait until it's over. I want to work with you as you proceed so that we can get ahead of the problem, ahead of the programs. And so I would ask each of you to briefly describe how we might be able to interact as you work towards completion of the required resiliency plans so that we can take advantage of this year's NDAA and build into it money, MILCON, get ahead of the problems, those installations that are critical and need immediate attention. We don't want you to wait, and we don't want to wait either. So let's start with, I'm going to go in reverse order here. We'll start with the Air Force and then work back and end up with the Army. General Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think for the Air Force, at least, we've enjoyed a really good working relationship with your staff. I saw that firsthand play out when we were dealing with the aftermath of Hurricane Michael and its impacts on Tyndall, and then the subsequent storm event we had up in the Midwest that affected off in Nebraska. Maybe a better example is a lot of the language that you all have put in to this effect starting back in 2018. I felt like we had a good conversation going with your staff, and so that language was actually quite helpful to the things we're trying to do. I guess what I would say is that we're happy to be there in Washington or wherever you would like us to share the results of what we're seeing as we go out and do climate risk assessments at each of our installations, which are the first step in building those resiliency plans, which are part of our installation development plans. We have a lot of information we can share now already with our installation energy plans. We go to an installation, we do the planning, initial step of the planning, which is focusing on risk assessments and gaps and seams that we need to close. And a lot of those solutions involve private sector, leveraging private sector capital. And I think having you involved with what we're seeing there and what our ideas are coming out of there can be very helpful. Sometimes those kinds of initiatives might require legislative help to get across the finish line. So I guess I would boil it down to say I'm really pleased with the relationship that we have already in this job and in my last job when I was there in the Pentagon. And I think that's very helpful, and we'd like to see that continue. Does that help, sir?
It's a starting point. What I'm looking at here is an interactive period for the future so that we interact as we go forward. The NDAA is probably, at least our version is 3 or 4 months out, probably 3. And if we're going to build anything into it, we need to be on that task now as you work to complete. General Banta.
Chairman Garamendi. Thanks for the opportunity to comment here. Following up on what General Allen said, I think we have a very good relationship with the staff members in particular there with Congress and in this subcommittee. And that probably provides a pretty good opportunity for continued and regular engagement as we progress with our resiliency plans. I talked a little bit about what we had done thus far, and we've got a completed resiliency plan down for Parris Island, Marine Corps Recruit Depot, Parris Island. And we've got several installation energy security plans that are completed with 2 actually completed, with 3 more coming online in the next couple months. So they've got a lot of data now that we can share. Clearly, we have more to do and to stay on trajectory in order to meet the requirements from the NDAA. But we're happy to share that information in whatever forums or venues are most productive to ensure that we're updating Congress and your subcommittee as needed. And I'll pause there, sir. Over.
Thank you, General. Admiral Lindsay.
Garamendi, thank you. I think what, as far as interactive and making sure that you and the subcommittee is aware of and up to speed, so to speak, on what we have in the hopper, and providing regular updates on the projects that we have currently underway that talk to installation resiliency and climate change, whether it's energy, other utilities, and then obviously as soon as the NDAA is released, and obviously providing you an update of those projects as well, and providing some kind of regular drumbeat to your staff and to the subcommittee staff, so you can see what we're working on, where we're working on it, and how those support resiliency and climate change and other efforts in that area, sir. So I think, at least from my perspective, we're happy to do that. I think that might be helpful in ensuring that you know what we're doing, where, and how it feeds into this important topic. Over.
Thank you, Admiral. General Grabham. I mispronounced your name, General. Forgive me. Gabram.
Gabriel, yes, sir. It's okay. My dad knew it was going to be an issue. Just to add to my comrades, I mean, we're available at any time. We have 30 for the Army right now that are at or near completion that we could share. 11 are final, 16 are in final review. We're also partnering with the Pacific Northwest Lab to assist in helping us put a strategy in the implementation plan for those plans to put them into action. And there's several other areas such as the Office of Initiative Projects and even the Energy Resilience and Conservation Improvement Plans. So I think the lateral communication between the services is pretty good. But we look forward to sharing whatever battle rhythm or drumbeat that you would like to set up. Thank you.
Battle rhythm and drum beat. I said it, I'm going to say it again. We're going to write a new NDAA. And the lessons, well, let's just say the climate and the geology have given us a heads up. And a lot of the MILCON that is currently stacked up for the next years may or may not address these resiliency issues. And so what I want to what I want to do and will make every effort to achieve is to look at what is critical so that the sustainment of the facilities is in better probability. And therefore, for each of you, I'd like to know where you are in assessing the most dangerous, the most critical risk at the most critical basis, so that we can deal with that as we rack and stack our own assessment of military construction, as well as other programs that we would like, that you need to have done sooner than later. So that's the whole point of this exercise. And yes, thank you very much for working closely with the staff on all of these things. We're going to ramp it up. I don't want to wait 2 years to get to the most critical issues on the resiliency side. Mr. Wilson, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Thank you, Chairman Garamendi. I appreciate it. And for our panelists today, what an honor to be with you. And we appreciate your dedication and service. And in particular, General Banta, I want to thank you for your recognition of Parris Island, what extraordinary facilities there are there and how historic they are. I previously represented Parris Island, and so it was really so heartwarming to learn the history of it, that in fact, the first Spanish settlement on the east coast of the United States was there in 1566. And then, of course, over 100 years, it's now been a marine training facility. So 600 years of appreciation. And then I'm really looking forward next month. I will be next door at Hilton Head Island for the Heritage Golf Classic. So those of us who grew up in the low country of South Carolina are so proud and grateful for the success of Parris Island. With that, a question for General Gabram, and that is, I was grateful to hear the success of the energy savings performance contracts. We have those at different facilities in South Carolina, and they have been remarkably successful. Military installation resilience has been defined as the ability of an installation to avoid, prepare for, minimize the effect, or adapt to and recover from extreme weather events or changes in environmental conditions. This does not include other important considerations like internet connectivity and security, adaptive design that accommodates multiple tenants and missions, and enabling infrastructure. What is the Army's concept of installation resiliency, and how is that postured to meet the additional considerations?
Well, Chairman, I'd first thank you, and I'd like to, it kind of starts with our strategic energy and water plan. And then it really goes around 3 goals. I'll start wide and kind of hone it down a little bit. So it's made up of resilience, which the simple definition is ensure energy and water for critical missions under all conditions, sort of to your point. Efficiency and affordability. Those are the 3 objectives we look at within the strategic plan. To your point about energy savings performance contracts, so we are all in, and we since 2010 we've awarded approximately $1.8 billion worth of these contracts, and right now we got 99 in execution. And we're looking to do a lot more. So we completely understand the capability that these could bring in terms of resilience and efficiency and affordability. And we are working to take a look through our installation, the energy and water plans, because that covers that risk assessment in that plan. And then where and when we can go with or look to a savings performance contract. Thank you.
And General Gabram, you have extraordinary people representing you on the Hill. And if they could provide to us the examples of energy savings performance contracts, that's just been such a positive story for our country. I have with General Allen, do you have any experience employing non-traditional funding streams to address the resiliency issues, such as public-private partnerships, enhanced use leases, or other innovative financing to help supplement the traditional MILCON and facilities maintenance process? Additionally, is there any consideration of secure microreactors, small modular reactors on a secure post, such as Offutt or possibly Anderson Air Force Base in Guam?
General Allen, you're muted.
Can you unmute me?
There you go. Now you're unmuted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry about that. Congressman Wilson, thank you. I like to think of energy savings performance contracts and utility energy service contracts as non-traditional. I think we've been doing them for a little while, so maybe they're in the traditional category now, but they have been very powerful tools for us. And going back about 5 years, we've been able to leverage about $750 million in private capital that we then pay back through energy savings. So that's great. The other things that we've had some success in, and I think are really help kind of guide our path forward in this, are our energy assurance leases, and then enhanced use leases, where in both cases we're taking underutilized land on an installation, partnering with the public or private sector for them to come in and set up in a case of energy assurance leases, some sort of energy generation that then provides energy resiliency back to the installation. We've got 130 megawatts of potential generation in work now with EALs, energy assurance leases, that we're looking at across 5 installations. And so when you start to do that math, it's not quite perfect yet, but when you're talking about that kind of generation, you're getting close to being able to island your installation off the grid if you need to. And on the energy, or on the enhanced use lease side, I was just out at Edwards Air Force Base in California, and got to see what is starting to come out of the ground, what will be the largest PV array in the country, photovoltaic array in the country, that's out on the western edge of Edwards. That's an enhanced use lease. It's going to put 800 megawatts of power into the California grid. Green power, big deal. Our benefit there, our fair market value that we get out of that, has a potential to be about $2 million a year that then we can put into energy resiliency initiatives at Edwards and other places around the Air Force. So, you know, particularly out west, but a lot of our installations have that untapped potential, I would say, and we're only getting better at doing these things. And a lot of where we're heading in the Air Force is going to involve those kinds of tools. Does that answer your question, sir?
It does, but I hope you will look into small modular reactors too, in a secure position like on Offutt or Guam. And you can get back with me later on that. Congratulations on your success. A final question for Admiral Lindsay. To what extent has climate conditions or extreme weather events resulted in shifting missions from particular installations to others in order to reduce infrastructure vulnerabilities? And what has been the impact of the adjustments?
Thank you for the question. None of the missions, I don't believe that I can think of that we've actually shifted. We've obviously had to do repairs and continue to weave climate change and resiliency efforts into those installations that are in the face of natural disasters or subject to hurricanes or earthquakes. But as we do those, as we construct those facilities, as we modernize them, as we renovate them, we weave improved building codes and criteria so that they are more resilient to the natural disasters that they may be subject to in the future. But I can't think of specifically any missions that have been permanently shifted as a result of climate change or sea level rise. Over.
Well, thank you very much. And as I conclude, I grew up in the holy city of Charleston with the Charleston Navy Base. And so I was a Sea Cadet, all right? So I really appreciate your service. I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wilson. There's been a change in the gavel order. I think Mr. Courtney has stepped out. If and when he returns, we'll put him back in. And therefore, the gavel order is Crow, followed by Scott. And I believe there are 3 others that have offered to join in. I'll give you that information when Mr. Crow finishes his questions. You have 5 minutes, Mr. Crow.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to all the witnesses as well. This is a very interesting topic, one that I've spent a lot of time looking at. My first question goes to a bill that I had in the FY20 NDAA called the Military Installation Resiliency Assuredness Act, the MIRA Act, which actually requires all major military installations to conduct or to integrate into their master plans on a rolling basis an assessment of resiliency, climate effects, extreme weather, and the like. It's my understanding now, 18 months after we passed that none of those assessments have been conducted or completed at this point. So my first question is, have those been done, or are they in the process of being done? And then the second is, how does that work in with the renewed emphasis that the DoD has on climate? I forget which one of you said at the beginning that you're actually using now the climate assessment tool, and you expect that assessment to be completed at the end of FY22. So if you could explain to me the intersection of those two efforts, the status of the MIRA Act, and how you expect those to go forward, I would be very appreciative.
General Gabriel, I'll start. So I would say we are in the process of executing in reference to the MIRA Act. I would the Army Climate Change Assessment Tool for us, it's web-based. It really is a predictive analysis tool of the climate vulnerability, right? It's like a risk assessment. It looks at drought, flooding, fire, tornadoes, hurricane, ice storms, and so we have about 117 installations assessed right now. And then we also have, and this is just, that one came out in July of 20, and our Climate Resilience Handbook came out in August of 20. It's really a companion, it's a planner to the Climate Assessment Tool, and that goes into and leads into our energy and water plans. And as I said, we have 30 at or near completion. And I said completed by 22, but we're working in stride. If we can get them done sooner, obviously, we absolutely will do that. So that's kind of how those two tools integrate or nest into the plan.
General, can you just tell me when do you know, and if you don't right now, that's fine, but if you can give me that information, when you expect the first of those master plan updates to occur relative to the MIRA Act?
I don't. Updates to you, I do not. So for the record, I'll have to check that and get back. But in terms of what we are doing at the installation and below and then above up to me, we're getting after what I just described.
Okay. And then secondly, with the remaining time we have here, obviously moving to microgrids and having to do the metering that we have to do, which obviously remains a big challenge within many of our installations, because I know we don't even have a firm grasp on the actual energy use itself at all of our installations because we don't have the meters in place. Could you just briefly describe the importance of making sure that we have supply chain integrity of our hardware, so we're not sourcing those from places that are within the Chinese sphere of influence, and we have integrity to the hardware that's in place to conduct this work?
Yeah, I would, Congressman, I would use SACES, our partners, our Corps of Engineers, the acquisition process that we go through. We address it in those arenas. And it's obviously the threat there is, as you've described, is, it's significant. So I would, the metering program you mentioned, we are in the process of executing that. We installed about 19,000 advanced meters. We got, I think it was 120 enterprise energy data reporting systems in place. So we are in progress. We're not there yet, but we're working on it. Over.
I appreciate that. Just in the remaining time, I would just reiterate the need. Obviously, this is an area of great importance to me to make sure we're building this out. But at the same time, I don't want us to put hardware into place in these microgrids that actually provide a backdoor for some of our main adversaries. So I think that's something we all have to look very hard at. Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Crow. Mr. Scott, you're next.
Thank you, Chairman. General Gabriel, I'm told, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the Fort Hood's February electric bill is somewhere around $30 million, and that is effectively the same amount of money that was spent for all of fiscal year 20 for that base for energy. Is that correct?
Yeah, Congressman, the projected bill, you're correct, is approximately that. Although, we're in the process of challenging and taking a look at that, the accuracy, because as you know, there's many folks in Texas that are looking at a higher bill than
Sure.
what it's actually going to turn out to be. But you are correct. It is in that neighborhood.
Okay. Are the other bases in December, or is Fort Hood the primary one?
Fort Hood is the primary one, Congressman.
Okay. And so did we have any other bases that ended up with similar changes in their billing for their power supply throughout other states?
Congressman, this is General Allen for the Air Force. Yes, to answer your question. Some of our Air Force installations have gotten February utility bills that are higher than abnormally high. Over.
Okay. Are those installations in Texas? And if not, which state are they in?
They're in Texas.
Okay. I think that's something that we as a committee may want to look at. And as we look at the new sources of energy, I know we've got the Marine Corps Logistics Base in Albany that's using alternative energy from a landfill. And then at Robbins Air Force Base, we've got the solar panels. I do, and I think this gets back to what's Mr. Crow and I think Mr. Wilson were talking about a little bit. As we look at these new sources of energy, the resilience of them and the dependability of them, I don't have as much faith in solar as I do some of the new technologies that we see out there. And I hope that you'll continue to keep us more informed with the types of technology that you're pushing towards for the energy on our installations. And General Allen, I didn't see in the report where you talked about Air Force Material Command and I'm sorry, about our installations like Robbins Air Force Base, the depots. How is DoD addressing facilities on our depots that are in degraded conditions at this stage?
Thanks, Congressman. Well, our depots do resource themselves with their working capital fund. Certain of the facilities, particularly those that are generating the service that they provide, some of that facility sustainment is covered with working capital fund, but they are primarily reliant on the O&M that we program every year, just like we do for all of our installations. And our infrastructure investment strategy that was published 2 years ago is our path by which we're trying to improve that. In a nutshell, we're trying to resource at a minimum of 2% of our plant replacement value each year, which we believe is the minimum level that we need to sustain effectively to realize the design life of our built infrastructure. Does that help?
It's a good answer, and thank you for that. One final question, and I'll turn it over to other people. How much of the resiliency plan has to do with demolition and getting rid of old buildings in the inventory on all of our bases, whether they be depots or more traditional bases that are not energy efficient? How much demolition are we looking at where we could get rid of some of these buildings and the payback is pretty short term?
Sir, General Allen again, our investment strategy targets a 5% reduction through demolition, but and that's fairly modest, but that's a good start because absolutely we need to reduce the amount of built infrastructure that we have so that the money we're able to program is it goes further, frankly. Over.
All right, thank you, gentlemen, and I'll yield the remaining 20 seconds.
Very good. The next two will be Mr. Kelly and Mr. Johnson. So Kai, you're up.
Yes, sir. Mahalo, Chair, and aloha to my colleagues and to our panelists today. Aloha from Hawaii. My question is for Admiral Lindsay. Sir, I'm out here in Hawaii, as you're well aware. Hawaii is critical to our national defense strategy, as as outlined by the Indo-PACOM commander. And my question to you, sir, is in regards to the Barking Sands Tactical Underwater Range, which is a critical part of PMRF, the Pacific Missile Range facility on the island of Kauai. This location and the range is very unique. It's strategic. It plays an essential role in realistic training operations, especially for submarine warfare fleet and their fleet engagements in the Pacific Theater of Operations. The range allows training, tactical development, and really it's a premier facility for crew certification and training enhancing for critical readiness of the Pacific Fleet. Right now, sir, roughly 30% of the Barking Sands Tactical Underwater Range and its in-water sensors, which as I understand, 12 of the 42 in-water sensors are inoperable due to the aging infrastructure. And as you all know, sir, with climate change and major hurricanes that come through the Hawaiian Islands, or at least near the Hawaiian Islands, every hurricane cycle, which is in the summer, we're just one bad storm away from additional sensors being compromised. So given this serious threat to the readiness of our submarine fleet, will the United States Navy prioritize and accelerate funding towards underwater communications infrastructure projects that will prevent the potential loss of these undersea warfare training sensors and capabilities, such as mine warfare and underwater communications and splash detection? Over.
Thank you, Congressman. And I thank you for highlighting the importance of that facility and that installation in Kauai. I've had the opportunity to visit that here in the past, and it is a unique and critical asset, one that we need to continue to work on to improve its resiliency and its ability to do its mission. In fact, that's one of the locations that we're pursuing energy resiliency projects to make sure that it can continue to do its mission even under adverse situation. The range you talk about, sir, unfortunately doesn't fall underneath my purview, the equipment or the operation of the range. But I'm happy to take that question if you'll allow me for the record and get back to you on a better answer to that. The operation of the range and the equipment associated with it, it just doesn't fall underneath my responsibility. Maybe installations can. So I apologize in being unable to specifically answer your question, but if I could take it for the record, I'm happy to get back to you on a better answer. Over.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good, Admiral. And I'll be out there in a few weeks, so I'll have a chance to meet with the base commander, the captain out there at PMRF. So thank you so much, and I appreciate you helping run down and answer for that. Thank you. I yield, Chair. Thank you so much.
Mr. Clay, thank you for the question. The next is Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I feel like I should apologize to the generals for being underdressed for today's hearing, but we're all multitasking at home, so we appreciate your indulgence on that. Question for General Allen. In the aftermath of the recent winter storms, my base here, Barksdale Air Force Base in Northwest Louisiana, has been cited as a good case study for its resilient water system. And the base has redundancies in place so that it can switch from its primary water source, which is the city of Freeport, our largest municipality, to a secondary source if the need arises. And I've been told that while these water redundancies were a godsend during the recent winter storm, they were fairly significant issues with power generation. The base has diesel generators in place for mission critical facilities, but there are logistical concerns with making sure there's enough fuel on hand to keep them running. So as we look at electricity redundancies on our installations, I'm curious what your thoughts are on capitalizing on the characteristics of each individual installation and their surrounding communities. So for example, Barksdale's, our home in Northwest Louisiana, is a natural gas rich area with a significant amount of infrastructure in place that I think would make a transition to natural gas generators or even a natural gas power plant relatively easy. So should we be capitalizing on those types of geographic qualities and distinctions? And can you speak to any examples of where the Air Force has done that in other parts of the country?
Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I think you're exactly right. We need to tailor our resiliency, whether that's water or power, to what best fits the circumstance where the installation is. And very often, what that might look like is just a separate substation for power, a redundant feed, if you will, that is not necessarily connected back to the same plant that could fail and deny power. We also, we've used spot generation powered by diesel fuel around our installations for years. I think there are better ways to do that now, but we still do rely on that significantly. Some of the work that we do through UESCs or energy assurance leases involve natural gas power generation coming onto the installation, which essentially allows us to island should we need to from the grid, or if we are island, that allows us to continue to operate. So our energy assurance leases, while we like green energy, aren't necessarily always involving the use of green energy. So to your point, we're going through these programs. Our focus in energy resilience and water resilience has been mission assurance. And so we are going for the solutions that will deliver us the best bang for the buck in the way of mission insurance. And sometimes that does involve, to your point, natural gas generation. Does that help?
Very helpful. I appreciate that. Just gives a little perspective on it. And I have another question. Let me go to General Gabriel, if I can. As you know, Fort Polk has also been a case study in resiliency over the past year, and I have that installation in the south part of my district towards South Louisiana. And we had a recent weather event. Of course, it wasn't as big of a resiliency threat really as Hurricane Laura presented in August of last year. There were significant challenges with electricity generation during that event. And as we look to expand the concept of building resiliency through energy generation and microgrids on installations, would you agree that we should be prioritizing those installations that history shows are really more likely to suffer from extreme weather events than others?
Yeah, Congressman, absolutely. And, as we look around the country and we regionalize and we look at geography, it's really important. And we look at patterns, and this is the tools we've talked about today, help us make that assessment. I am very close with Fort Polk, with Laura and Delta. The second hurricane, you remember, that came through was Delta, and then now Uri. I would tell you that you can be really proud of the team there at Fort Polk. Their resiliency as in the human dimension, they really did great. And the partner on the ground, frankly, Corvius, is we're still working on roofs, because that roofs were a big part of the damage. The good news is the new roofs that we were put on, the privatized homes, did very well in the winter storm Uri. Absolutely agree with you 110%. Fort Polk is just in an area of the country where it's susceptible to climate change aspects left and right. So agree. Thank you.
Thank you for that answer. And I'm out of time. I'll yield back, but just say first that we're blessed to be in the greatest state in America. But yes, we're situated geographically to take a lot of hits. So thank you for that. And I'll yield back.
Let's see, every committee member let that comment slide by, Mr. Johnson. The gavel order, Strickland, Moore, Lurie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am from Washington State, and I'm going to quibble a bit with my colleague about the greatest state. But with that said, Joint Base Lewis-McChord is in my district, and Washington State doesn't have the same type of weather events like hurricanes and severe winter storms, but we are increasingly impacted by changing weather conditions that have led to large-scale forest fires on both sides of our state. And one of the ways that climate change has affected Joint Base Lewis-McChord is really about the wildfires and the impact. We have warmer weather, we have changing rainfall patterns, we have severe winds, and those create wildfires that are just damaging and devastating. And these are going to get worse if we don't start to take climate change seriously. I'm glad to hear that the Secretary of Defense has declared climate change a national security issue, because it is. And so I want to start with General Gabriel. and really talk about fire resiliency and earthquake preparedness. So again, while the recent wildfires didn't reach JBLM or even the Yakima Training Center in Eastern Washington, can you talk a bit about fire and earthquake resiliency strategies that you're using on the West Coast? And just tell me a bit about what you're doing.
I just had the opportunity to visit JBLM about 3 weeks ago and had a great time. I'd also like to say, not related, but they're going to open the first children's museum in our nation in April, and it's going to be great for families. But to address your primary question, we do have a wildland fire program at JBLM, and the three things that we're looking at right now are controlled burns, fuel reduction, and then fielding of proper fire equipment. And I'd like to say on the wildfire side, it comes down to manning in some cases and people. 97% of our garrisons have qualified wildland program managers, they're called, and obviously JBLM has them with the position they're in the country. And we also, the critical mission nodes, or critical nodes, as you know, is Gray Army Airfield, the Western Air Defense Sector, the ammunition storage points, mission and command and control centers, and then the fire and emergency centers at JBLM. So we know those are critical and very important. We assess the earthquake risk at JBLM as medium. I know that probably doesn't make you feel good, but those facilities, a lot of the facilities were built between the 40s and 80s. So that infrastructure we're looking at very closely, because 60%, relating to the earthquake threat, 60% of the buildings are not constructed to current code to withstand a greater than a magnitude of 6 earthquake. So I think we know our Jersey number at JBLM. We just got to work to protect.
Right, and then, thank you. And then I have one more question. Like I said earlier, the fires didn't necessarily reach the base, but we know that wildfires have a severe impact on air quality. And in many times during the summer, we get air quality ratings that are very, very unhealthy for sometimes weeks at a time. And this can cause respiratory issues, it can cause bronchitis. And so can you talk a bit about how these types of incidents affect readiness, because clearly people aren't even advised to go outside and do training and physical activity?
I think you're referring primarily up towards Yakima, because there's a lot, as you know, there's a lot of training that goes there from JBLM. But the air quality is a concern. Obviously, I think the smart thing to do, and we do, is understand when it is and where it is, and then training. We don't go out and train in the middle of a 10-day air quality issue where we expose our soldiers to those type of conditions. So that's taken into effect by the chain of command. So I don't have a fix for that per se, but in terms of discipline, to set our life, health, and safety, I call it, to set our folks up correctly, we do take that precaution. I hope that answers your question, ma'am.
Great, thank you very much. And thank you for acknowledging the Children's Museum at JBLM. I was here when the First Lady was visiting, and it's the only children's museum on a military installation in the US. And so we're very proud of that facility. I yield back, Mr. Chair.
So, Mr. Johnson, take that. Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Chairman. And I will let all of you, everyone quibble over each of their states. I think that Utah's record and performance stands on its own. So we'll rise above this conversation and we'll just let it settle. Thank you all for being here today. It's an important topic to discuss and seeing how this interacts. Something I'm excited about is I'm on the Natural Resources Committee and Armed Services Committee, and hope to be, a reasonable, solid voice in this matter. And one question, I have a couple questions. General Allen, you may be aware, in 2019, the DoD listed Hill Air Force Base in my district, the #1 base susceptible to climate change. But just a few months later, an Air Force report did not even have it listed on the top 10. So there's some inconsistency or discrepancy there. My question would be, is there efforts in place to ensure that we have, or that's broadly communicated, a framework that's used, whether it be the basis, criteria, or methodology used in making these determinations? Is there an effort in place? Are you committed to continuing that? You can see how that would be alarming to be number one, and then all of a sudden not even on first basis. Question.
Hey, thank you, Congressman. Yes, I was working in the Pentagon when that happened. The first list was calculated using criteria that the Office of the Secretary of Defense issued. And when we saw the results, we ran the list and ran the criteria a little differently. And that was the second list you're talking about. I guess what I would say is each was a top 10 list, and all 20 of those installations are high on our cross-check to understand how they are in fact threatened by climate change and atmospheric conditions, weather conditions, et cetera. Does that help you, Congressman?
Yeah, just understanding that there's a commitment to broadly communicate the framework and what goes into it, because lists are lists, but if we know.
If I can tell you that our installation development plan. Can you all hear me?
On my end.
Congressman, I lost you there for a second. Can you hear me? Am I muted? Michael?
You're good to go, sir.
Can you all? I think I'm not hearing anything.
Okay, here's, we're going to come back. I believe Mr. Moore has a communication issue, and we're going to come back to you for another 2 or 3 minutes. Mr. Moore, you want to try one more time?
Can you hear me, Chairman?
We can now. Please continue.
I'll address one more question to General.
I'm getting some serious feedback from somebody who has a microphone that's not muted. Okay, Mr. Moore, your turn.
General Allen, enhanced use leases. My next question is enhanced use leases. An ability for the community to interact with the Air Force in our case are such a positive. I view them as a win-win. That's the way I communicate them. Do you know if there's any chance to use enhanced use leases to help fill the gaps in energy resilience improvements where maybe MILCON dollars are not able to be used?
Congressman, can you hear me okay? Absolutely, there is. We have enhanced use leases that return value, fair market value for whatever the lease is, back to the Air Force so that we can invest those dollars in energy initiatives. And then we have, I guess I would say, enhanced use leases that are tailored to energy assurance. We call them energy assurance leases, where we're actually taking underutilized land, partnering with a developer who will bring in some sort of energy generation, perhaps to put onto the grid, or perhaps to put right back into the installation, or most often, to put energy into the grid, to sell into the grid, but then we have an agreement with them that should we need it in the event of a denial of service, that then we would get that energy, if that makes sense. So enhanced use leases broadly, yes, we get fair market value for whatever underutilized land we're leasing, and we can use that money typically to reinvest in facilities, which improves their resiliency. And then very specifically to energy assurance, we have energy assurance leases, which are targeted at just what you're talking about. Over.
Thank you so much. And Chairman, sorry for some of my connectivity issues. I'll just end with saying to my colleagues on the committee and to General Allen, our office is always available to talk enhanced use leases. We really do find them to be a really productive way, and open that up to any of my colleagues if they want to be involved at all. Thank you all. I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moore. For all of us that are actually all across the nation, in the South as well as in the West. The Federal Power Administration, Western Power, WAPA in the West, is providing energy to Beale Air Force Base. And their purpose, among other things, is to provide power into the general grid, but also specifically to provide power to the federal government programs. And so if you happen to have one of those grid from the Power Administration, Western Power, the eastern side, Georgia, and that area, we'll look at that. And General Allen, again, a best practice that might be shared across the services. So a little memo from you about what you're doing at Beale and how that's working out would be shared all around. Okay, I'm going to go now to Miss Luria. That would be the last person on the first round, and we might have an extra half hour after Miss Luria. One more thing, if there is a serious disruption of my service, Miss Luria, you're taking over. So not only you get the question, but you may have the chair.
Well, thank you, Chairman Garamendi, and thank you to our witnesses today. My district includes Naval Station Norfolk, a large part of Hampton Roads, and my questions I'm going to address to Admiral Lindsay and also to General Allen because of Langley Air Force Base. And Hampton Roads is particularly at risk because of sea level rise. I was just looking at some of the provisions in last year's NDAA, which required the examination of community infrastructure located outside the installation that is necessary to maintain mission capability or that impacts the resilience of the military installation, such as civilian infrastructure related to disaster risk reduction, power, water, communications, transportation, and emergency services. In Norfolk, for example, this seems to particularly pertain to Naval Station Norfolk and the access road of Hampton Boulevard, which floods frequently and is projected to flood more frequently over time. General Allen, I know that at Langley Air Force Base, there are some similar issues related to sea level rise, recurrent flooding that are specifically of interest. And I've gone to visit the pump stations there and kind of understand some of the flooding issues at that installation. And so I was just curious if you could both weigh in on any guidance you have to the localities that seek to work with DoD in order to use some of the existing authorities and funding that we put in place for defense access roads, defense community infrastructure projects, so that we can best create that partnership between DoD and the local community to make sure that we, literally shore up some of these issues with sea level rise and flooding, and make sure that we can continue to have, access to these spaces and that you would make recommendations wise for that coordination and any guidance you have. Admiral Lindsay, do you want to go first?
Yes, ma'am, and thank you for the question, and thank you for your support of our men and women in uniform and the important mission that the Hampton Roads area serves, not only for our Navy, but for our nation. I think there's some great examples of where we collaborated with the local communities. A fundamental mission of our installations is to maintain good relationships, productive relationships, good cooperative coordinated relationships. And the joint land use studies that we recently completed here a couple of years ago, I think, are a good example of that, where we look at land use outside the fence line, so to speak, in the communities, and work together to make sure that that not only is able to, the way that land use can sustain the military mission, but also how we can partner to help those local communities build land in a more productive and efficient way, so to speak. And then, you bring up Hampton Boulevard. There are some challenges there that we continue to tackle in that area. And so as we renovate, as we construct, as we do things to modernize and sustain the installation there, we're constantly weaving in the aspects of sea level rise and climate change so that that installation can persist and continue to do its mission for many decades into the future. So that's another important part of what we're doing in Hampton Roads, is getting after this resiliency and climate change issues through our mission assurance assessments, other tools that Congress has provided. Just as we talked about, ESPCs, ULs, and those things. So I think the relationship there is good. It's productive. As you know, the communities submitted a Defense Community Infrastructure Program grant request to help with some of those issues there. The two installations gave endorsing letters to that. It was not picked up recently, but we're hopeful going forward that they'll be successful in being able to get some of those grants to address some of those issues that you've highlighted here. Hopefully that answers your question from a Navy perspective.
Yes, well, thank you, Admiral Lindsay, and General Allen, from the Air Force perspective, do you have any additional guidance or words of wisdom for our surrounding communities outside of Air Force installations that would help improve coordination for these types of projects?
Thank you, Congresswoman. I've had the privilege to be stationed at Langley twice, from 2003 to 5, and then again from 13 to 15. I look at Langley as perhaps being a pathfinder for other communities. I'll give a shout out to retired Navy Admiral Craig Quigley, who runs the Hampton Roads Federal Facility Alliance. And then we had tremendous partners in Hampton, the city of Hampton. When I was there, we were doing a lot of partnering with them on reducing encroachment around our airfield, which was very important. We had already been the benefactor of a lot of recovery money from Hurricane Isabel that came through in 2003. So we were able to do about $500 million worth of improvements between the hurricane recovery and the F-22 bed down. And you mentioned the pump station that we put in that allows us to move rainwater off the installation, helps with our flooding problem. So those things we did early, and I got to enjoy them when I was there 10 years later. It really worked. Langley is a place that understands climate resiliency, so it's really built into every dollar that they're spending because they're living the challenges of that. But I think what's most important, frankly, are those partnerships that we have with Harumfa and with the city of Hampton, and they are very, very active participants in bringing P4 solutions to the table for us. And at least that was my experience when I was there. So I think it's an example for others.
Well, thank you, General Allen and Admiral Lindsay. And I agree that Harumfa, as an organization, really brings together both the military and our communities across Hampton Roads to help solve these problems. So we're grateful for Admiral Quigley and his work. And I also want to say that, Langley has a place in my heart too. My daughter was born there at the hospital. So thank you again for appearing today.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lurie. We're now going into the second round. I'm going to forego questions that I would ask, but I will make one comment. The hearings that we've had this year and in previous years all intersect. We've talked about the depots, about the shipyards. We've talked about this whole issue of resiliency. These issues all come together in the maintenance and the upgrade of the bases. And so as we go into this year, I want to make sure that we pay attention in the NDAA to the necessary investments to maintain these bases. Now, Mr. Wilson, Ms. Luria, and Mr. Johnson are up for questions. I would alert everybody that General Banta had to leave for a meeting at the half-hour mark, and so he has departed the hearing. So, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you very much. And actually, I want to commend all of our witnesses. They've really very well answered so many of the issues that I feel so positive about, like energy savings performance contracts, hopefully looking at small modular reactors to be self-sufficient in the event of severe weather, just as the incredible snowstorm, just inconceivable of what occurred in Texas so recently, my goodness. And so with all of this, indeed, this is directly related to readiness, and I'm really grateful for the military leadership that are being proactive to get ready and to look out for our service members and our ability to protect American families. And so with that, I yield back.
Thank you much, Mr. Wilson. Ms. Luria, we're back to you. Mr. Cayley, are you still with us? Okay, here's the order. Wilson, you just finished, Luria, Johnson, and then that will complete it unless somebody else rejoins. Ms. Lurie. I believe she may have been satisfied with her last round of questions, and she has left. Mr. Johnson, one
I
more
have no
time
further
about the,
questions. No
would you
further
like to,
questions.
would you like to comment on the glories of Louisiana one more time?
I won't take advantage of my time and do that again. It speaks for itself. It's res ipsa loquitur, as we say in the law. Things speaks for itself. No, I'm really grateful for the generals for their straightforward answers today. It really helps. I'm a new member of the committee and the subcommittee, and I just find all this fascinating. So I'm grateful to just listen in. So thank you for all that. I yield back.
Well, I just see Ms. Lurie has returned. Came very close to losing your slot, Ms. Lurie, but go for it.
Oh, well, Chairman Garamendi, I will pass on further questions and really appreciate the witnesses' time today. Thank you.
Thank you. That completes all of the witnesses. There are some questions that have been asked for the record, and those have been submitted. There may be a few more, so if any of the members have questions for the record, please get them to the staff soon, like within the next couple of days. I do want to thank our witnesses. You have an extremely important role, as do we. The communication between your work and our work is essential if the issue of resiliency is going to be resolved. I mentioned a moment ago that this particular hearing cuts across much of what we do here in this committee. We are responsible for the physical infrastructure of the Department of Defense facilities, and therefore the information given today and in the days and weeks ahead as we put together the next NDAA will be essential. So for the presenters today, the professional staff will be back in touch with you. I also will reach out to the committee members who have knowledge of the installation in their districts and ask them to inform us of issues that they know of that may not be working its way up through the chain of command. So as we work together to address resiliency and the installation performance, we'll be looking to just that, working together. So Admiral Lindsay, thank you so very much. General Banta, I thank you if you were still here, but we'll send a little note of appreciation. General Gabrin, thank you very much. And General Allen, thank you for your participation. We look forward to working with you in the days ahead. So with that, this hearing is adjourned. Thank you so very much.